In this video, you'll learn how to implement Podsights tracking for Shopify via Google Tag Manager and Elevar. There are 3 steps required to go live, and if you have access to your Podsights dashboard or your Pixel ID, then this should only take a couple minutes. The steps we need to go live: number 1, we need to install the Elevar data layer to use with Google Tag Manager. Number 2, we need to download and implement the pre-built container that Elevar creates into your GTM account. And last but not least, we need to test, go live, and potentially remove any previous tracking if you have older tracking set up for Podsights that may not be working. So first things first, let's jump over into the Elevar dashboard and the data layer. So this data layer is what needs to be installed on your Shopify store that generates all of the events that you see here that populate variables that are used by tags in GTM. That's a mouthful, but things like our view, product, add to cart, initiate checkout, etc. These are all events that the Elevar data layer creates, and ultimately what you see populate inside your GTM preview mode. If we look at the data layer, this will have all of the data that we could potentially use in any tag, in this case for Podsights, and how we configure and track various behavior across the site and send back to Podsights. If you need to implement consent mode, you can implement and integrate with Cookiebot and OneTrust or other providers that we support, and we have full guides that can go through this process to implement if needed. Once you install the data layer on your store, then the next step is actually going to our pre-built tags. And this also, depending on when you're watching this video, we are merging our client-side tracking and server-side tracking into one unified view that you'd see here. So it might look a little bit different, but the process largely is going to be the same for you. So once you are inside the Podsights destination, Podsights as of right now in 2022 only has client-side tracking. They don't have a conversion API available to send data to, so our only option is client-side tracking. We simply need to get our Podsights Pixel ID. So if we head back over to our Podsights dashboard, in our Manage Events section, you can just head over here to grab your Pixel ID to ultimately drop into your GTM container. So once you have your Pixel ID, go ahead and drop that into your Elevar account. Pixel ID, download the container, and then import into GTM, which I've already done ahead of time. And you'll see we have these 5 core events that are set up. They're base tag, product view, add to cart, initiate checkout, and purchase. You can click into each one of these and see the different values that we have preset. You can modify this, so if you want to send a user ID or something more specific to Podsights, you can modify this and map to the variables that exist inside the Elevar base container. That's it in terms of GTM and the Elevar setup. Once you go through the process of previewing, you can see the different tags, so our Podsights tags that are being triggered across different events, and ultimately you can publish and go live. If there are ever any errors that pop up in that web container, you'll see these errors potentially populate here in your Elevar account, and you'll receive an alert if there are any errors that are impacting your tracking. So that's it. That's how to set up Podsights tracking on Shopify via GTM and Elevar. If you have any questions, please let us know.